Hi, and welcome to Faculty Focus, a podcast supporting the clinical education community in Leicester. We bring you Educator CPD, showcase new initiatives, and shine a light on some of the faculty behind it all. Hi, and welcome to Faculty Focus, a podcast supporting the clinical education community in Leicester. We bring you Educator CPD, showcase new initiatives, and shine a light on some of the faculty behind it all. Right, hello and welcome to this episode of the Faculty Focus podcast. And today we've got two doctors who are currently at UHL, and they've come to talk to us a little bit about medical education outside of UHL and really in relation to the Association for the Study of Medical Education in that organisation. I'll let you introduce yourselves. Neil, Natasha.
Thanks so much for having us on the podcast, Dr. Hughes. We're big fans and have listened to many an episode. It was actually a coincidence that I spotted Natasha's name on the cardiology rota, and we happened to be working on adjacent wards and realised we're both part of ASME and thought, why don't we put our heads together and come on the show? So my name's Neil. I'm an internal medicine trainee, also an honorary fellow in medical education at the medical school, and I'm currently serving as vice chair of trainees in the Association for the Study of Medical Education.
I'm Natasha. Like Neil said, it was quite a coincidence when we met, but I am currently an F1 at Leicester at UHL. I'm also a specialised foundation doctor in medical education, and I've literally started a couple of months ago. It's coming towards the end of my first year as a doctor, so exciting times. And also, the main part, I am the co-chair of JASME, which is Junior Association of Medical Education.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for introducing yourselves. I think a lot of people who start to get into the world of medical education probably start to notice some of these organisations that are around. ASME's are pretty around quite a lot. There's usually lots of posters up and around the place talking about various meetings, webinars, conferences. And there's AME, that's the Association of Medical Education in Europe, which is also another big organisation. So it's really great to have you along just to tell us a little bit more about it. So in sort of a few sentences then, what's ASME all about? What's its aims?
So ASME is the Association for the Study of Medical Education, and its main aim is to advance scholarship in the field of medical education. Although it's still titled medical education, it's recently expanded to include all healthcare professions. Whether you're a pharmacist, a physio, a nurse involved in teaching and education, then ASME caters for the needs of all of those involved in healthcare. And essentially, there are three arms to what ASME tries to deliver. It's fostering excellence in educational delivery and leadership, educational research, and also educational scholarship. So it runs an annual scholarship meeting every year, and there are also many specialist interest groups and subcommittees of ASME, two of those being TASME and JASME, so they're the trainees and the juniors groups respectively. And so I have the privilege of being on the TASME committee and Natasha on JASME.
Great, yeah. Well, let's go in chronological order then. So Natasha, JASME, so the Junior Association, you are an F1 currently. So what's that about and how did you get involved?
So JASME is Junior Association of Study of Medical Education. It is a career group of ASME, and it caters for any medical students and early career doctors interested in the field of medical education. So we deal with the, junior part of your career in med ed. We do a lot. We work a lot with ASME. We have conferences. We run an annual conference. We have several awards that we offer and the opportunities that medical students are early career doctors. So that's up to F2. F3 and beyond, TASME usually looks after. And we kind of liaise with several of the other sub-branches of ASME. So like there's TELMED and EDI, etc., which we can talk about later. In terms of how I got involved, actually, I think I got involved as a third year medical student, if I remember right. And it was simply a friend of mine who was involved in JASME. And they said, perhaps become a local rep. So when I was in med school, I was in Plymouth Med School, and I decided to apply for the position of being a local representative for JASME. And that's how I kind of made my way into the committee. I loved it so much that I stuck around for a couple of years, eventually made it onto the national committee, and I became the national lead for local reps. I looked after all the local representatives across UK. And then last year, so October last year, I then was elected as co-chair. So it's kind of been a stepwise journey into kind of progressing onto the committee.
Yeah, well, that's great. And now you're an F1. How does that sort of time-wise, is that quite a commitment then for being on that
It
level of commitment?
can be as your as the role grows, my responsibility towards the committee also expands. But I have a really good team behind me. I have a co-chair, so there is another half, Julia. We lead the committee together, and we've just elected a new committee a couple of months ago. Having that and support of the ASME office, you can kind of manage it. It's just good time management and organization.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, isn't it? Because it's interesting to hear that, even at a medical student level, that there is
Yeah.
engagement with medical education. I guess you're the kind of the main stakeholder in that in terms of the recipients of medical education. So it's good that there's a way of having a voice in the conversation, putting views across and things. So, but yeah, we can get into it a little bit more at an undergraduate level. So Neil, well, you're on the TASME, so you are the sort of next rung up. Is that right?
Yeah, so TASME caters for those who are post F2, if you're a doctor, up to being a registrar, so pre CCT essentially. And in terms of other healthcare professionals, if you're within 7 years of qualification, then you can join TASME as an early career educator. So I actually got involved with TASME because I was looking for a conference to present some work at, and I stumbled on the TASME section of the ASME website and saw they had various awards. And one of those awards was the Teaching Innovation and Excellence Prize, which just happened to fit really nicely with some of the work I'd done at Leicester Medical School on teaching clinical reasoning. So I applied for the award with zero expectations and very fortunately was shortlisted, and that involved being invited to present at the ASME ASM in a panel judged session and fortunately won the award. So that was kind of my route in. And then the following summer, the TASME committee had a vacancy on the awards team. And so I applied for it, wanting to give other educators that platform that I was fortunate to have to share my work. And so last year I was on the awards team for TASME, and then there was a vacancy for vice chair, which I applied for at the end of last year, and I've been vice chair since.
Brilliant. That's great. So you kind of got in just really by chance, I suppose, just looking around and finding sort of links and websites and things, and then it's sort of taken off from there. That's brilliant. And you both mentioned that there are meetings, obviously awards and conferences. So what sort of awards, sorry, what sort of conferences and workshops do they hold throughout the year? Both, I guess there are some sort of ASME sort of general ones, and then there are ones more specific to your particular group. So yeah, Natasha, then Neil.
Yeah, certainly. So JASME, we hold an annual conference. Again, it caters to the kind of the med students levels and F1, F2s. We usually hold it around fall time, so October, November time, and we invite anyone who's kind of been involved in any medical education project, innovation, kind of theory thought process to present. We usually hold poster presentations as well as oral presentations. It's generally, we really want to create a safe space for those kind of early career development and ensure that we give adequate feedback and that opportunity to network. We usually have fantastic speakers we are able to invite, and we are hoping to do ours, and we try to do it in a central location as well, so it's a bit more accessible to everyone. In terms of awards, JASME and TASME hold separate awards. We offer 4 awards during the year. So we have the GIP, IIP, and the EGS, and there's also an intercalation award. So the GIP is a group innovation project, and then there's an individual innovation project. And essentially anyone who has an idea that's innovative, or kind of you're developing a medical education, say, technique or project of some sort, you can apply for it, and we offer a small fund towards this as prize money. So it's, I think, £300, and obviously you get a prize certificate. And on top of that, we invite you to present at the JASME conference as well. And then we have the intercalation one. So the intercalation prize is for students who have intercalated in medical education or have an extra degree during those months as up to an F2. So typically it's an intercalation degree that they've done, and any project they've done during that, it recognizes the extra effort they've gone ahead and put towards medical education, and we offer them to apply. And then again, there's a prize money associated with that.
Yeah.
And that typically they present at another conference called the RME, which is a national ASME conference.
Right.
In December.
That's great. So you can kind of escalate as you kind of get more and more
Yes,
involved, and as the awards.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I guess, Neil, that there's those sort of awards are mirrored at at a sort of TASME level?
Yeah, very similar setup, a different, slightly more senior target audience. So we have 4 awards as well. There's the Teaching Innovation and Excellence Prize, which I described. The winner receives a trophy, monetary prize, and we're also pairing the winner with a mentor to support the writing up of their project for publication in one of the ASME affiliated journals. We also have the Collaborative Minds grant. So this is where if you're seeking a collaboration with someone who's outside of your geographical region, but you're looking for money to help finance your travel or accommodation, then we offer a grant for that. The winner this year is actually from the UK going to Sweden to look at a neurosurgical simulator that's been developed there. And he hopes to sort of gain some insights into how they developed it and bring that expertise back to trainees in England. The third one we have is the TASME Spring Conference Prizes. So we also have an annual conference, and that runs every spring. We had it at the start of May this year in London. It was an absolute sellout event. And so the best oral and poster presentations win a prize there. And then we have a category to award similar prizes, but at the ASM itself. So if you're an early career educator presenting at the ASM, then we award best posters and oral presentations there as well.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's so important now to pick up awards where you can and present work regionally or nationally, just to for your job applications. So it's great to hear those sort of opportunities. So some of our listeners will find that really useful, and we'll put the links into those websites and those awards into the show notes. You also mentioned that there was some other sort of CPD, I guess. I suppose this is a good place to plug any other things like journals or podcasts. I guess there's a lot of content potentially that ASME produces. So what would you point people towards?
So we have a number of megabytes, they call it, throughout the year. So these are online webinars, usually for 1.5 to 2 hours, where a specific topic within medical education is taken, like, for example, EDI or a simulation. And usually there's an expert in the field who is being informally interviewed by someone, but there's a discussion around their expertise and how they've implemented that in their own institution, and then advice for others on how they can implement that best practice locally. The TASME committee runs a podcast, which we release monthly episodes for. So I was fortunate enough to be in the last episode where we interviewed an acute medicine consultant from Coventry called Amy Bearbridge, and she's big on cognitive biases. So we had a really insightful conversation on how that plays a part in our diagnostic and decision-making process. And so we also have a few workshops throughout the year. So, for example, we ran one just before Christmas looking at how we can move from your typical sort of Likert scale in an education project and developing something that might be slightly more objective and have some more robust methodology when it comes to medical education.
And I'd like to just add a couple of other things. From a JASME perspective, because we have local representatives across each medical school, there is someone like within your medical school who represents JASME, and they hold several kind of local events. So if you have a look out for them, there is usually some. We branch out to most medical schools across the UK. So they hold several local events that we fund and we support as well if you can. So that's one way to just ask around and see if there's anyone there. If not, apply to us and I'm sure we can create a position for you in medical school. We're always looking for that. And then I think just being part of ASME itself, as a kind of student, from a JASME perspective, I can say that we give you a reduced rate. We recognise that you're students. We recognise that membership's expensive. So if you go onto the ASME website, it itself has lots of resources on it. So I think it gives access to 2 journals. Correct me if I'm wrong, Neil. I think it's a clinical teacher and I can't remember the other one. Medical education, I think it's called. So just having that journal access and just reading a few articles from that is quite beneficial, and obviously it gives you access to the prizes and the conferences and kind of the other committees and groups.
Yeah, I think that's really useful, isn't it? Those are 2 sort of fairly well-known journals, aren't they? And it's useful even if you're not going to have to read it cover to cover, but it gives you a flavour as to where the conversation is at the moment. And it's probably no surprise that AI is obviously a big thing at the moment. It's probably features in many posters on many conferences currently, and not just at ASMEs. But yeah, that sort of stuff just keeps you in the loop, doesn't it? And as you're reading some of these things, it again builds up that ability to think about how you might write your projects up in a similar sort of way for publication. You mentioned that you sort of provide advice for submitting abstracts and manuscripts either to conferences or to journals. What sort of support do you sort of pair people up with a mentor, or do you you tend to sort of take that on yourselves? Or?
So ASME has a mentoring scheme, which is one of the perks of being a member. So once you have access to the members area of the website, you can actually find an entire directory of senior clinical educators who are offering their time as mentors. And based on your sort of personal description, what your interests are within medical education or even clinically, you can be paired with a mentor who will then meet with you on a one-to-one basis and can help you develop your ideas, give you some objective feedback on where you're at with your evaluation if you're doing a project. So that's a formal mentoring scheme. And then at each of our conferences, we try to hold a workshop centered around ways of evaluating your work. And that generally tends to help sort of boost confidence in using something other than a subjective Likert scales, which we do still see a lot of. And I think what's also important is a lot of us who come into medical education are often from quite scientific and numerical backgrounds. And so it's sort of shifting the mindset to not just having numbers, but understanding why those numbers came about and pushing forward theories and methodologies within qualitative research and the impact it can actually have.
Yeah, it can be really difficult to move from that scientific approach, which, a lot of people coming into medicine have had that, one or two sciences as a kind of, as an A level or equivalent, to then switch to this almost sociological or psychological kind of field of education and learning. It can be quite difficult, and you're looking for the numbers, you're looking for the sort of significance in some of your findings, and actually having to make that switch and realize that this is a different field of science that has, philosophically a different basis in some respects, in some areas. So getting help in that, mentoring or advice from others who've gone down that route is really important to kind of make that switch. Otherwise, you, as you say, you end up converting Likert scales into percentages and then applying statistical methods to stuff which probably shouldn't have had that application in the first place. But that's probably one of the more valuable parts, I would have thought, for your members. And I guess, so, yourselves are being two examples of people who've followed your passion in medical education, and then blending that with your clinical roles as doctors. Do we have other people in the trust who've kind of we have education fellows, but I suppose are there other people who've kind of trodden the path that you're currently treading?
I think it's one of the questions I get asked the most, which is, I've done my CTF year after an F2. If I go back into clinical training, I don't want to lose my hand in the teaching side. And how do I do both? And I think both Natasha and I have sort of found our roots, Natasha being on the SFP, which I'm sure she can tell us more about. But the way I've sort of gone about it is I've gone less than full-time clinically, and I've maintained an honorary contract with the university. And it has its disadvantages, which is it's not paid work, but I enjoy the autonomy of doing bits of education as and when I see fit. And it also gives me the sort of time and space to do the TASME work alongside clinical training. But I am aware of a few people in Leicester who have maybe perhaps combined roles more formally in terms of employment. So a couple of good examples are Josie Hodson. So she's currently an IMT working 60% clinically, but then has a simulation fellow job with the medical school, 40% to fill the other days of her week. And I think she'd previously been an education fellow with the trust. And so I think having had that experience, she might have been in a better position to negotiate that sort of split time and keeping a hand in both. And she works alongside Adam Bonfield, who is a PEDS emergency medicine trainee. And he also is a sim fellow alongside that. He's slightly further down the line with his training. But it's good to see that those are people from different specialties that have managed to do it. I think PEDS were at the forefront of pushing for less than full time, and I think they piloted it initially, but it was very successful, and other specialties have caught on. And then there are other formal routes in education. So I'm sure you know Will Hunt in the anaesthetics world, but he's a good friend of mine, and we did the CTF year together. He's now an academic clinical fellow, which has more an emphasis on education research, and so he's doing that alongside his aesthetics training. And I just think these are all really positive examples, because I've always felt for a long time that research careers have been further ahead in terms of having the balance and formal pathways, and it's nice to see that MedEd is catching up.
Yeah. Absolutely. We certainly have an established program of education fellows within the Department of Education. They're non-clinical fellows for, up to a year. And then, like you say, then people often move into these sort of split roles when they return to training. I know the foundation program, Natasha, certainly has some 4-month blocks, which are education sort of blocks as well as the clinical blocks that people rotate through. Is that something you've done during your?
Yeah. So the specialized foundation program essentially, so every trust across England, I think it changes. It depends what they can offer. So the one that Leicester offers is in my second year, so as an F2, one block will be 80% kind of med ed and 20% clinical. So that's 1 day a week I'll be working, 4 days a week. I will get time to focus on medical education projects, as well as pursuing a PG certificate in medical education, which is partially funded by the trust, so the Deanery, which is really helpful because they recognize, it can be quite an expensive endeavor to pursue these degrees. And then, so the specialized foundation program, I think when I applied, we interviewed for it, but I think that's now changed in the applying for training. But I think it's now more just you opt in and then they may offer you a position. But saying that, I've spoken to kind of priority program doctors as well, and they offer kind of support towards medical education and time towards medical education as well in a similar way. But I think the caveat is they don't offer PG Cert kind of support in those posts. But still, like Neil saying, it's quite nice to see that medical education, the other branches, leadership as well. Those two are kind of catching up in terms of recognizing that it is a valuable skill to have, and those interested to kind of support your role into that. And I hope that potentially when I get into training, I might do a CTF or I might do a kind of a balanced role further on down the line. So SFB gives you a good flavor of that, which I think I'm quite grateful for.
Yeah, it's really useful to hear that there are those opportunities, and keeping that clinical side to your role is, I guess it helps with that credibility side of things, but it means that you can then see where the sort of opportunities or the need for particular projects and initiatives that start to make themselves obvious if you keep that clinical role. So that's great. So in listeners to this podcast that want to get involved, you've mentioned membership, so we can put the link into the show notes so they can look up annual membership rates to get the benefits of that. You say there's local reps in med schools and all the deaneries, is that right?
Yes, so it's a local reps at each medical school across England. We have a fairly big committee. It's a fairly good outreach. We tend to have 2 to 3 students per medical school, and actually I can send a link to you for the show notes. We'll be recruiting further local reps in the next couple of weeks. This is actually timed very well in terms of expanding our committee.
Great. Lovely. What's the situation postgraduate now?
The TASME committee recruits every year in August, September time. It involves a written application. You have to be post F2 to apply if you're a doctor, otherwise an early healthcare professional within 7 years of qualification. Following written application, we shortlist for interviews, which are usually in September. Appointments to the committee are a 2-year term. So in terms of vacancies, it very much depends on who's coming up to the end of their term and if people are deciding to stay on or moving roles within the committee. But generally, we have an awards team, a conference team, a podcast team, and then a communications team, as well as a special projects team who help with the workshops. And there's usually a number of vacancies across each of those domains each year. So you do have to be a member to apply. And again, we can send you a link for how to access membership. There are opportunities for subsidised rates if you come from a widening participation background. And if you are struggling individually for membership, some institutions have membership, in which case you can access some of the perks of being a member through the institution, such as journal access.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's lots of different options there. Great. I think we've sort of got a pretty good idea then of what ASME is about, and certainly the JASME and TASME elements of that. Is there anything you feel like you want us to get across that we haven't had a chance to cover, or do you think we've covered most of it?
Yeah, I think we've done.
Okay.
I think we've had a really good conversation. I think the most important message is don't be shy. Please step forward. There's lots of opportunities around, and we're more than happy to support. And that's why we have these committees, because we want to expand a network, and collaboration, I think, is a very strong, it's very important for kind of development.
Yeah, I think that collaborating and the idea of a community, really, because it's something we've mentioned on the podcast before, but it can be difficult in medical education to know where your community is. It's easy in clinical medicine because you have specialties and that is your community, but for things like research or education, it can be difficult to link up with other people who, just to bounce ideas around or collaborate on projects. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So this is where you need to be. Great. Thank you very much, both Neil and Natasha, for joining me today. We will put all the links into the show notes, as we said, so you will be able to follow up on anything you might be interested in. But for now, we will let you guys escape. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and maybe we'll have you back in the future to talk about ASME again.
Thanks so much for having us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Faculty Focus podcast. If you like the episode, please share with friends and colleagues. You can also like and subscribe to the show, and perhaps even leave a review. Clinical education can be tough, but we're stronger as a community, so if you have an idea for an episode or would like to come on and talk to us, do get in touch via email or Twitter. Details in the show notes. The Faculty Focus podcast, Community Development Showcase. Thanks for listening to the Faculty Focus podcast. If you like the episode, please share with friends and colleagues. You can also like and subscribe to the show, and perhaps even leave a review. Clinical education can be tough, but we're stronger as a community, so if you have an idea for an episode or would like to come on and talk to us, do get in touch via email or Twitter. Details in the show notes. The Faculty Focus podcast, Community Development Showcase.